Assalamu alaikum students. This is in continuation with the previous lecture. We were talking about Shakespeare, and this is the second lecture on Shakespeare's background. And we started off with discussing the points of his causes of his popularity, and we started off with this thing that Shakespeare's has a variety of themes, and that those themes have got a universal appeal in them, and that is why that is one point of his popularity. Then it is the second point I discussed was meant for simultaneously for layman and the scholar. That means a layman could have enjoyed, and that is something that the play that we would be doing, King Lear, is something that you would find this simultaneously appealing to the layman as well as the scholar element in King Lear. Then there is another cause of his popularity, which is Shakespeare has a profound knowledge of human thoughts and human feelings and human behavior, and which makes him which makes his characters very rich. Then and that also enables him to give, and that's the next point. I hope you have your pens and pencils ready. The next point of his cause of his popularity and points of his superiority is that he has a variety of characters. See, the two plays that you have done, Oedipus Rex and Christopher Marlowe's, they were very limited characters. In Oedipus Rex, there were very limited characters. In Christopher Marlowe, you also saw the main protagonist was Dr. Faustus, and you had many minor characters like Wagner and Reuben and all those different characters. And of course, there were two or three many main characters like Mephistopheles and all. But here in Shakespeare, you will find, especially in King Lear, the play that you would be reading, is that there's a variety of characters. And there's so many characters, and to balance all those characters on one plate and then to present them in that manner is actually quite an art. Although he was not a university graduate, but and yet he's Shakespeare, and his words have become words of wisdom. We'll talk about that shortly. So then he have his variety of characters, and almost all of them identifiable. You may write this down, please. All of them are identifiable with common man. You know, he gives us variety of characters, but all of them identifiable with common man. Then we have his cause of his popularity, and we see it in his art of characterization, but because he goes deep down, and it is an in-depth dealing of all sorts of character, of round characters. Now you must be doing it in especially in the genre of novel, the round characters and the stock characters. Round character, roughly speaking, although Shakespeare's times don't have this definition, which were later given in the 20th century, the early 20th century, by in his book by Elements of the Novel. The writer who's written The Passage to India and Howard Zinn and all. Anyway, so here round character means character which evolves with time, for the better or for the worse, but certainly for the better, not for the worse. That would be a dystopic thing and aspect in that. So art of characterization is very profound in Shakespeare. That is what you find in him. Even the secondary characters, they're not dull, and they're not auxiliary, as you will see especially in this drama, that would be doing. Then we also see perfect plot. Now, uh, um, S.T. Coleridge has mm, categorized Oedipus Rex as an example of perfect plot, or and as Aristotle has also called it a very perfect plot. However, um, in Dr. Faustus, you saw that it was a loose plot. We had your main character, main plot of Dr. Faustus, and then the subplot was loosely connected to it, and there was like it was not very well knit plot. Whereas in Shakespeare, although with so many varieties of character, you will find that he balances them in such a manner that they are a very well knit plot. And especially in King Lear, that you would see is that there are two characters, two plots, main plot and the subplot, and they are connected together in a manner which is very which is very, a master. It shows his mastery. Then, he has a perfect plot, except for songs, which will not be there in King Lear, especially, certainly, but they would be in 12th Night, and they would be only for relief. And however, in this perfect plot, you will find nothing is redundant. Then you find in his writings, in Shakespeare's writing, balanced blend of comedy and tragedy. There is a respect for human feelings and he does not laugh on anybody. If you remember that quality of Chaucer, in which he did not laugh at anybody, but he laughed with the follies of human behavior and all. Similarly, in Shakespeare, you will find that there is a respect for human feelings, and he would if anybody is a hunchback, he would never laugh at that person, right? However, if any character is showing some follies, he would show that those characters, those traits. Then we also find mastery of language in both prose and verse in Shakespeare. And then there's a very important element in Shakespeare is that there are moral lessons without didaction. Now that's very interesting. See, Dr. Faustus, we found a didactic element in that. There were very strong features of medieval aspect, morality play, morality aspects. However, you find your morality, but you navigate your morality in the plays of Shakespeare, and especially in King Lear, as you will see. Then you have avoiding subjectivity and biases. He does that, but not always. When he gives these comments like frailty, thy name is woman in Hamlet, that would not justify this particular aspect. Okay, and then he gives due status to love. Love is something a very important element in his dramas. Not just his dramas. And I don't know whether I mentioned it in the previous class also, that Shakespeare actually preferred to be called a poet more than a dramatist, because he said that he used this ladder, he used this medium in order to earn money, whereas drama. Whereas he wanted himself to be called a poet, and his sonnets, well, that calls for another aspect altogether. His Shakespearean sonnet, they have a different medium, they have a different division than Petrarchan sonnet or Sonnets. For example, the model of Wordsworth sonnet is Petrarchan sonnet, which is 8 line and a sestet, whereas a Shakespeare's sonnet is quatrain, quatrain, 4 lines, 4 lines, 4 lines, and then a couplet. So, and he used this model, and there uh, very popular, some of his very popular sonnets. Let me to the marriage of true mind, let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love. That it starts with these lines. So anyway, the sonnets, he wanted himself to be called more of a poet. So that is why he has given due status to love. And his words have become and you can just Google them out. I'll just speak one or two more to you. His quotes and have become notions and of wisdom. And another very important feature in his writing style is his optimism and underlying hope. Although King Lear, as you will see, Macbeth, as you will see, Othello, all these, Hamlet even, all these are tragedies. But then there is an optimism and an underlying hope in these dramas. However, now here comes his weaknesses of his. Well, he uses those weaknesses to his disadvantages, advantage also. For example, he lacks this factual knowledge, but he tactfully avoids these details, and that is why we have his drama of Antony and Cleopatra. Now, Antony is a Roman, general and a warrior, and whereas Cleopatra is an Egyptian queen. So Antony and Cleopatra, and so many centuries apart, and he's given that romance. So that's and this lack of factual knowledge is also shown in his anachronism. You may write this down: ANACHRONISM. Anachronism. Anachronistic or anachronism is when you are not very sure about the time frame, and you mix the events up. But for Shakespeare, we can say that he used them to his advantage. Occasionally, there are improbable expressions, proverbs, and comic texts, and for example, as you will see in 12th Night, some are born. Mariah is there is a dialogue. We are going to go in detail about that. That Mariah says that some are born great, some have greatness thrust upon them, and things like that. However, I'm just going to give you 2 or 3 examples of his Shakespeare's quotes, which have become. Sometimes they have become cliched because of the overusage. I hope you know the meaning of cliche. That cliche is something that which loses its significance, its importance, its an impact due to overuse. And some of his sayings have become like that. But like I said, that. Just a minute. Okay, one example is there's never not much choice among rotten apples. That's one. And then the devil can write scripture. And and in Macbeth, when Banquo says, if you can look into the seeds of time. Now, see, he's using all these figurative devices into bringing all those figures of speech. You must have done them earlier. You must be knowing that, like metonymy, like synecdoche, and like starting from simile and metaphor, of course. But look at that, it brings depth into his words. For example, if you can look into the seeds of time, and then an old man is twice a child. He says in Hamlet. Um, Now, this is something which you can say, which has become kind of a cliche. Brevity is the soul of wit. Uh, it has been so, or yes, in Hamlet, there's this: nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. That is a quote which was used in declamation contests, some time back. But now it has lost its like that vigor. Then. Mm, the people are the city, right? So these are just small little, and we will be talking about many as we go by. um, Now, let me just okay. uh, Acha. Now, another very important aspect of his dramatic technique, which you will find, and not just in him, but in earlier all the plays that you've studied, especially like, for instance, I told you that in Oedipus Rex, it was a drama shown in the one revolution of the sun, that is in the from morning till night, and not much was given, you know a lot of weightage was not given on the props and the costumes, and it was they were least um, spent upon. However, only the chorus was the most important element of Greek tragedy, in which chorus was the most paid element of the story. However, in when we come to Shakespeare, we also same the same simplicity. For example, mm, uh, a chair or stool showed an indoor scene, a man wearing riding boots. Yani, from one scene to chain to another scene was a very easier transformation. Earlier Greeks, in Greek drama, as you have seen, that chorus also was used as a curtain changer. But here, the only a very short elements of the stage scenes are replaced by in the new scene. Once a person goes out of the scene, and the next person comes with very little to be shown on the stage. So. In this book here, it is written. Earlier I was narrating and giving you the lecture from my own notes. Yeah, now these are all my notes, as well as, like, it's a mix. So here it says, such simplicity was on the whole an advantage. Now this was an advantage. Why was it an advantage? Because it was a scene. It was an advantage because with very less expenditure you could show the drama. Moreover, like I told you, that the laymen, the people who could not pay, and they were standing very close to the stage, they were they had one liberty, and they had one good vantage point, in the sense that since the actors, they were very close to the theater, even their the slightest subtlety of voice and gesture was easily appreciated by the people who were very close to that stage. So shall I would like to continue with this, with the background of, let's say, Shakespeare, King Lear. Then I'm going to come to the background of the play itself. Now, let's come down to 1603 when Queen Elizabeth has died. Now, Shakespeare is now a favored, although King James, who replaced Elizabeth, who was his Scottish cousin, as you may know. Queen Elizabeth's Scottish cousin was King James the First of Scotland, and King James of Sixth of Fourth of I think of England. Anyway, so once he started ruling this whole realm of Scotland and England and Ireland, that was quite a task in itself. And King James, as written in by many critics, was not a very a people who, sorry a person who showed his appearance to the people, or who was very interested in dramas. However, how did King James give his patronage to the Shakespeare's company, especially, and then they became his favored men, and they came to be known as King's men. They were favored to that an extent. So uh, uh, let's talk about um, some background to King Lear. Now, David Dacius, he writes on page number 276 that King Lear, himself was an old Celtic sea god, and it was a folk tale of Lear and his three daughters. Acha. Ab, the thing is that we saw this is no sin, taking inspiration from some old legend or old myth is not a sin. We saw that Oedipus Rex was also taken from some myth, from the legend of Oedipus. Similarly, Dr. Faustus was a play which was earlier written by a German writer, and it was earlier known as Dr. Faust, and its translation was circulating in the market in 1580s, which Christopher Marlowe used to his advantage, and wrote Dr. Faustus's masterpiece. Similarly, you must be aware that Hamlet was also, Hamlet was also something which the inspiration of which was taken from earlier plays of Hamlet and Thomas Kyd's Hamlet and things like that. Anyway, so King Lear is also likewise taken from different sources. Now, it's the mastery of Shakespeare that he has taken this story of Lear, which was again circulating in the market. And earlier it was, as I just said, that it was a Celtic sea god. It was a folk tale of Lear and his three daughters. And this folk tale is attached to the character to this character of Lear by Geoffrey of Monmouth in the 12th century. And this is a reference, by the way, I'm taking from David Dacius' book, page number 276. And okay, so this story of Lear, which Geoffrey of Monmouth had associated with in the 12th century some king Lear, or the sea god of Lear. This story, we see that it keeps on reappearing in the, and then in the, before Shakespeare, it is a story from Holinshed's Chronicles. Holinshed was his history. He was a historian, and Edmund Spenser's the fairy queen, उसमें इसका सब वो मिलता है. So the story was basically taken from Holinshed's Chronicles and from Edmund Spencer's. Um, for example, Edmund Spencer, he took the largest in conception and implication of all Shakespeare's tragedies. Uh, okay. Um, that although he has taken from different sources, but he actually molded in them in a pot, in a melting pot, in such a manner that they became Shakespeare's own. So and then there is that's one background of Lear, King Lear's and his story. And there's another background to it, that the background goes like this, that it's in 1599, King James of Scotland had written, and this is now from James Shapiro's book. Where did it go? Yes, this one, which is something that I'm going to share with you in soft copy also. And this book is, you would be able to skim through this book, and it is interesting. So these two references I'm taking from James Shapiro's book. Earlier reference of David Daish's was about the King Lear and his, the Holinshed Chronicles and all those things. But here, the background of King Lear is again can be traced back to 1599, when King James of Scotland at that time. See, in 1599 he was in Scotland. He was not the king of this whole isthmus, this whole land of Scotland and England, because Queen Elizabeth was ruling this part of England. Acha. King James of Scotland had written a political handbook for his firstborn child, and warned against divisions of kingdom. So the storyline, as you will see, we will talk about it in the next class, inshallah, the overview of the story of King Lear, that this division of kingdom was something which King James, who by the way is King James at the point at the time of Shakespeare writing this play in 1606. So that was also one aspect, that obviously if Shakespeare is from King's men, he has to write for King's favor. Also, so that also went into his favor, that King James had written this political handbook for his firstborn child and firstborn son, and he had warned him against a division of kingdom, and he said that kingdoms should be kept straight, and that is mentioned on page number 33. Then Shakespeare as a literary architect. From Lear to Lear is a chapter in Shapiro's book on page number 47, and that is a very interesting, that Leir to Lear, because earlier versions of Lear's legend was Leir. So he has written a great deal about how did this Leir, it transformed into Shakespeare's Lear Lear, and what all were the points of his making it what it was. I think let's call it a day, because then I would be talking about okay, I can just talk about this aspect only, and I think that you can just read it before you come to the next class. Is the gunpowder plot. There was see, King James, he became king of England and Scotland, as I told you, in 1603, but in 1605 there was this gunpowder plot which was plotted against King James, and that was a plot to kill him, and that was that happened on November 5th, 1605, and basically this plot was to end the persecution of Roman Catholics. And I hope that you remember my earlier lecture when I was talking to you about um, um, Dr. Faustus's lecture, that there also this persecution. Queen Mary, when she came on the throne, she persecuted the Protestants. When Queen Elizabeth came on the throne, although it was a very smooth affair, apparently, and it was, but yet there were things that they had to manage through Privy Council, and they had to keep the Protestant England in control of all the subjects, most of the subjects who were Roman Catholics. So this gunpowder plot was actually was initiated by Guy Fawkes. You can just Google it again out, and there's a very small little cartoon clip which is very interesting. You can Google that out about gunpowder plot, which was a failed attempt. They were caught and then they were executed. So that was also it before King Lear. That is going to be in 1606. So we're going to talk about it in our next lecture, inshallah. So this was the background, second lecture on the background of Shakespeare and King Lear. Thank you.